Coming up on the ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your news and information from the state capitol and CDE. It is a busy time over at the state capitol. We'll bring you updates on that. Plus, we are talking today about mental health. We're talking with school counselors today about what's happening in their school communities. What do you need to know? And what are some of the best resources to support your school communities?
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Executive Director Dr. Edgar Zazwata. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us today. Go ahead and jump into the chat. Let us know where you're watching from today. Neri Pais is our very first person in the chat. Edgar, how are you today?
Neri is always, I think he's definitely leading here for number one fan status in many ways. So, not a competition or anything. I'm doing well, Naj. It's been a fun day. Gianna, one of our producers, made note right now, and I actually didn't realize it until I sat down that I didn't put on my coat, didn't put on a tie. Here's the real reason. Like yesterday, and I think some people noticed yesterday, I was on Our Mind First, Michael Kelly, hosting that, and I realized that I dressed up for him, but not for you, Naj. So I mean, don't take offense to that. In reality, it's what some of our members are already commenting on, and it's not quite that hot in Sacramento, but it is some news, right? And I think even in the school world, it's worth noting just the weather. I know we don't talk about the weather that much here, but just record-breaking temperatures here expected. And I know in Sacramento over the next few days, they're forecasting as high as 111 and across the state. So all that is a reminder. And our folks, we have to, we're preaching the choir, but just like keeping our kids safe, keeping each other safe, taking care of those most vulnerable in our communities who don't always have access to air conditioning, whatnot. It's kind of scary, right? It's summer. We're used to it here in Sacramento. We're used to high temperatures, but I think even this one is getting everybody's attention. So, dealing with the weather. Oh, one last thing. I do want to give a shout out to our folks. And I spent much of my morning with members of our leadership development committee here at ACSA. And it's a number of leaders from around the state. A lot of it, and I was joking with the group that they're working hard right now. They're not watching, but we do have a lot of our loyal members there. Maria Thompson, others who are always on.
Wait a minute, Maria Thompson's in the house today?
Maria Thompson's downstairs. She could have made her, we could have put her on camera.
Could have put her like right here.
Yeah. What's exciting about that work is the group is working on basically what's our next version of our strategic plan. And, some people think strategic plan, okay, those look nice, whatnot. But what I really appreciate about the work that our members are doing in our board, our leadership assembly are going to take this on, especially so many times this year has been referred to as a transition year as we get out of COVID, or at least out of the worst of COVID, and start thinking both as a system and as an organization, like, where do we go here? What do we do next? And so anytime, we get so caught up, and this goes for our members, you're just trying to get through the day, get that to-do list, but really taking a step back and thinking big picture about what are our objectives, what are our goals, how are we trying? Maria Thompson's there. Look at that. I just talked to her. So, why am I not surprised? I think last time we were in a board meeting, and somehow she found a way to not miss the show. So shout out to Maria there as we were just talking about it. So I just appreciate our members, especially at this beginning of this year, where it's a busy time for most of our folks. They still find time to get back to ACSA. Sorry. And
look at that. You didn't follow the rules, Edgar.
My son is calling me. It's his last day of summer vacation. Here at Sac City, we have a very late start. School start in Sacramento tomorrow. So today's the last day that I guess he could bug me in the middle of the day while being at home. But anyway, thank you to all of our members who make time to get back to the organization, to really think about where do we go next. And Maria and others, where we're doing some great work this morning.
Hey, you will notice that I've got the San Diego State and Penn State helmets behind me because this is officially week 1 of the college football season. You know, I'm a huge college football fan, and I am looking forward, Edgar, to getting your prediction at the end of the show about what's going to happen in that USC Rice game. And I see Charlie Hoffman is on here. Charlie's the biggest UCLA alum that I know. Charlie, I'm very interested to get your prediction on what's going to happen in that UCLA Bowling Green game. Here's what I can say, Edgar, and I think you would agree with me. The Rose Bowl seats like 100,000 people, and something tells me there won't be more than 25,000 for that UCLA Bowling Green game. Just putting that out there.
Hey, maybe a renewed excitement. You know, I'm not gonna fall for the bait. I'm not gonna throw, not at least right now. There's plenty of time to throw some shade at UCLA and the Bruins. I'll be nice at least this one. Maybe them going to the Big 10, Big 12 has sparked some enthusiasm here. So I don't know. We'll see. Although I think it's going to be hot in LA too. I'm sure being in the stadium is not going to be the most fun place to be. So.
Exactly. And Charlie just put on there 22,000 for attendance. And Mina, apparently you can get tickets for it. Apparently it's going to be scalpers night off over at the Rose Bowl. That's for sure. Hey, let me get to a couple of news headlines. And Edgar, we've talked about this ad nauseum here about the impact that ACSA has had during the pandemic over at the state capitol. The advocacy of our administrators has just been so impactful to the point where the governor's office is sometimes coming to us and asking for feedback before they move forward on guidelines, protocols, policies. I want to bring this up because a few weeks ago, we went right to our CTE members, right to our superintendents about the inclusion of language. This basically, let me just say it like this. This allowed pupils to complete one course in CTE in lieu of completing one course in visual performing arts or foreign language in order to receive a high school diploma. There was no controversy over this. And then all of a sudden, as we moved through the budget process, this got pulled out. It was our members who went to work, went to their assembly members, to their senators, said, look, you got to get this back in. It was put back in. So that was certainly important. I'll bring that up because there's another important advocacy effort, and this is on school nutrition. Senate Bill 490. Now, we sent out an alert to our superintendents yesterday. Nutritional services got some of this information, but I want to pass this along. Senate Bill 490 would restrict local education agencies from purchasing agricultural food products that are grown, packed, or processed outside of the United States and will dramatically impact LEA's ability to fulfill the Universal Meals Program. It would do the following: threaten the ability of schools to fully implement universal meals. It's estimated to increase food costs by about $500 million for school meals. It will fail to protect schools from price gouging and further exacerbate supply chain issues. So, Edgar, maybe you can just kind of explain this process to me. It has passed the assembly. Mm-hmm. Now the important thing is for our members to advocate to their senators, because this is moving its way to the governor's desk. If it's not there already, there's still an impact that our members can have, but we don't really have a whole lot of time to do it. It's like hours, not days.
Yeah. First, yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up. I'll come back to the food purchasing bill in a second. Let me start with some good news, or like you noted, just offer up some thanks and gratitude to our members on this CTE issue. I mean, this is a classic example of, a lot of stuff happens. I know you've heard Megan talk about this. You heard Yvonne in the last couple of weeks. I've mentioned it, that we're at the end of the legislative session. They wrap up tomorrow at midnight. And actually, no, what's today? Today's Wednesday, the 31st at midnight. So we're in the final hours here. But here's the thing, that surprises happen. So first, on the CTE bill, about now allowing that to be used as an elective credit, it would have had a huge impact, as I see some of our CTE champions like Charlie Hoffman. These are things that the system has fought for many years. So when we got wind that they were going to not expire some of the flexibility that we had on that end, to make sure that students do have the ability to utilize these classes as they're going towards their graduation journey. Our members mobilized. We brought this up in a number of different contexts with some of our meetings and councils and sent out some alerts, and folks quickly turned around, and sure enough, within hours, we were hearing from some of the elected officials that, hey, no, they appreciated us putting this on the radar, and they got it fixed. So that thanks to ACSA members for their work on that. On the second bill that you talked about, yes, last couple hours, this is another one, kind of surprised. This wasn't going through the system. The bill had disappeared. It popped up again, which was kind of a surprise to us. And here's the thing. We I think, are very supportive of buying local and really this whole farm to fork emphasis, and farm to school in this case, right? This is something that we've been emphasizing. We partnered in a number of different respects. Here's the key issue, and this happens with a lot of legislation that comes from Sacramento or DC. Well-intentioned ideas that sound great. How are those actually going to play out into implementation? I think is the key issue. This is why we think ACSA is such an important voice in this whole process. Not to say that they're going to listen to us all the time, but what makes us different than maybe a lot of the other groups is that we represent the people who actually have to implement it. We actually have to implement all those great ideas in that building that you used to be able to see before the construction took it over in the Capitol. All those ideas that come from out there, it's our folks who have to make those a reality. And sometimes, whether intentional or not, there's a disconnect of what does that mean. And then you specified some of those issues with this current bill about really it's going to cost money. It's going to it's going to impede on some of that flexibility or where we get some of this food for our students. So yes, we're in the final hours. The Senate is where the bill is going back to. So if somebody feels strongly about this, contact your senator. It's not the last chance. Even if the bill gets out, we'll have a chance to advocate with the governor's office. But oftentimes that's difficult. That's politics in itself. So we're in the final hours of the legislative session. So there's still a chance to make some make an advocacy push there. But you'll hear more from us on that front moving forward.
Yeah, and we've put the link in the chat that is a copy of the alert we sent out yesterday on Senate Bill 490. And I just want to make note of Angela Shell, who's one of our great members here, is here for us every week. She says, universal meals are oftentimes the only meals some of our students receive. If this bill passes, it's going to have devastating effects on students and families. She's absolutely right. That's why we need your advocacy. So go ahead, go on to our resource hub if you need the talking points on this, and reach out to the senators. And then Edgar, I just want to bring this last one up, and this is Senate Bill 70 for consideration. Would require completion of 1 year of kindergarten prior to a student's admission to first grade. The factors in this, beginning with the 24-25 school year, require a student to have completed 1 year of kindergarten prior to being admitted to the first grade of public elementary school. State legislative intent that a parent or legal guardian of a pupil eligible for kindergarten maintain the discretion to enroll the pupil in either public school kindergarten or private school kindergarten, which includes homeschooling, before enrolling the pupil in the first grade of a public elementary school. Now, as you know, many of you know, my wife is a kindergarten teacher. She has told me many times, not mandatory for kindergarten, but there is a difference. Those students who have formal kindergarten, when they go into first grade, they are prepared. They have more curriculum, their letters, their numbers, their reading skill. It's definitely there. Edgar, this is the question that I want to ask for your feedback on. We already know that the governor has been highly supportive of early education of TK. Our analysts put on here that the full implementation of TK is estimated to cost the state in the neighborhood of $2.7 billion by 25-26. And an analysis of this bill, Senate Bill 70, points to potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in cost pressures on the general fund, assuming 30,000 kindergarten students will enroll if it becomes mandatory. Edgar, I'm just going to have you bring out your crystal ball. As I said, the governor has been very supportive of early education, of transitional kindergarten. When we talk about this, this is about preparing students for the rest of their primary school and into secondary school. This would seem like something that the governor would be very supportive of, but I found that figure, the 2.7 billion on the TK, and then potentially hundreds of millions of dollars for mandatory kindergarten. That's kind of what stuck out for me as perhaps the pivot point on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think generally speaking, then I think all sides agree. Folks talk about expansion of early childcare. I mean, then folks pointed out, well, we don't even kindergarten's not even mandatory. So even as we're trying to implement other factors, shouldn't we that's low hanging fruit? So I think generally speaking, folks are okay with the concept. As with everything, devil's in the details, implementation, how they're going to require it. Is it going to be required at every school? I would say there was a little bit more concerns about the bill. What our team tells us is that most of those things were resolved. I think the governor is going to be amenable to it. But again, this is not going to be, it's going to be less about the policy. Did they get all the particulars correct?
Yeah.
And the fiscal impact is always something that the state is going to look at of what it's going to cost. And, right now the state, at least still this year, there's still some of those resources, but it would seem to be in line with some of the other initiatives that we've seen from the governor.
Totally agree. All right, let's shift focus here. We want to talk about mental health in schools, in our school communities. We have a great guest with us today. Dr. Loretta Whitson is the executive director of the California Association of School Counselors. Dr. Whitson, it is an honor to have you here with us on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. As executive director, you have the opportunity to speak with counselors up and down the state about the challenges that they are facing in schools. So that's my first question. What types of challenges are you hearing about?
Well, the sheer number of kids with anxiety, staff with anxiety, and what we call mood disorders is just off the charts. So trying to keep tab of what's going on in regards to all the students, and also a lot of the counselors are talking about subbing in classes and trying to make the best of that when there is teachers that aren't available to hold down the classes. So those are some of the things, just the sheer volume. What I do say is that most school districts have upped their school counselor workforce. So that's making it a little bit easier, but how do you reach everyone? And then how do you work within an MTSS program to make sure you're doing prevention type of activities and not just being an urgent care system with all the needs that are happening at this point?
Dr. Whitson, first of all, thank you for joining us. And thank you for the work that you do and your organization does. I mean, especially when you're talking about school counselors, this is one of those classic positions where you really notice the need, especially when you don't have it, right? When in those schools where where students don't have access to them, that's when you really see it. So, and especially coming off all the challenges the system has had, one can make an argument these positions are more valuable than ever, right? And they've always been highly touted. It's really part of that pipeline that helps us to get to student success. A lot of to do here in Sacramento about money, and that's the go-to. There's always these numbers, and I don't know if I've said this. Sometimes actually one of my pet peeves, when we're talking about policy, that's really easy to just talk about the big numbers, and I always question, well, how valuable, is that meaningful to the folks in the field? They just hear the billions, millions. What does that mean for our schools, right? But one of the things that the governor recently has touted quite a bit is the investment in this mental health plan. And I don't know how familiar, we don't have to get into the details, but generally speaking, I mean, what's your thought on the emphasis that the state has put forth, not just in terms of money, but what your vantage point, you're seeing this from a number of different angles. Is this just a resource issue? Is this a connection issue? How do you think some of the initiatives that have been out there are going to help the overall objectives?
Sure. So just to say that we're really involved in the legislative process. And so this is part of what we were working on. And some of the things that came out over the last, it says 2021, honestly, some of it was a little bit like red meat, throwing it out there and seeing from the Department of Health and Human Services and the pupil personnel service industry, all of us, how do we work together to bring more resources to students? So there were some parts of that where there was a lot of money thrown into things and a lot of one-time money. And what we were advocating for is to have ongoing money as sustainable and accountable that would work within an LCAP, LCFF model. So that's kind of our stance, but at the same time, we have these prevailing issues. So let me talk about a couple of things. One, we have a workforce issue, not only with our pupil personnel services, but we have a workforce issue with mental health people. So the average wait time for a student, depending on the area they're living, to actually get mental health therapeutic services outside of the school is about 4 months. So in the meanwhile, we have to figure out what to do in regards to that. And so with all the money coming in, what we're wanting to do is to strengthen, maybe in a paraprofessional way. And so there was money put by the governor for what they're now calling counselor coaches, but that is still a long ways off. So we've been working on those kinds of things, but also there's a residency program that was signed into law. And actually there's some little changes in it right now, but there's 2 residency programs. One is the Golden Teacher program, and then a residency program with the CTC. And those 2 programs are going to incentivize to get school psychs, school social workers, school counselors into trained and able to work in the schools relatively quickly. What I like about it is sort of a scholarship program where we lose most of our individuals that go through their master's degree to get that credential, is we lose them when they have to do a year of field work for free. And so this is going to give them an incentive of about $25,000. And it also will be a program coming out of the CTC that'll partner with a school district and a university to bring in a kind of a training program. So those are some of the positive things that are going on in regards to that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's just, I was a school district administrator for 22 years, and I've been advocating for different pieces. So I love hearing all the briefing, but some of this is like so much, you're trying to keep track of it, and then you're trying to tamp some things down and really try to explain to the administration what's really doable, and understanding all the things about how you hire people, how do you put in a classified person, because they have that, which is a career development piece. So it's been a lot to handle, and I think we
share that sentiment in terms of trying to make that connection both to the policymakers and then back to the field.
Right.
Folks, if you have a question for Dr. Whitson, go ahead and put those into our chat. We'll tackle some of those questions or comments as we move forward on our show today. Dr. Whitson, I want to ask you about Governor Newsom and some of the backing, the energy he has put into talk about mental health. First, he signed Assembly Bill 2508, which clearly defines the role of school counselors and recognizes the importance of access to mental health. Your association sponsored that bill. How is this legislation going to help counselors and schools?
Yeah, 50 years in the making, honestly, where we weren't able to get any kind of traction in regards to updating the ed code for school counselors. But it's not only just an external, like for administrators, but it's actually internal for school counseling too. Some of the languaging issues and the clarification that this ed code provides is to just really anchor into the areas that we are responsible for, which is mental health, social emotional learning, academics, and college and career. And so we believe that this is going to give us a scaffolding for that. And then what I'm doing and our association is doing with partners and is creating our expectancies and standards to go along with that. So just to back it up, we had the CTC did a rehaul of the PPS training standards, and that was passed, I believe, in 2000. And so that is rolling out this year with all universities have to be under the new training program, which added a stronger component with college and career counseling and with mental health. So that's how we're rolling this out. And we think it's going to really help define us, because one of the biggest issues we have, not just in California, but nationally, is just role confusion, what we are able to do and what we're not able to do. And the fact that a lot of the administrators don't have training in regards to how to best utilize PPS. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're also going to add some of those kind of components. Like, for example, in our conference, we have a strand for administrators, and it's just talking about how to roll out this and some of the things going on with that.
Dr. Woodson, so one of the things that we've been doing here at ACSA is over the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, we had a series, Your Mind Matters, really focused on mental health. And if we had a goal, it was to try to destigmatize our members, us talking about the whole issue of mental health. And we had some of our members, educators, we had some thought leaders, researchers. We even had the first partner come on and talk about some of these issues. There's obviously a lot of attention on this subject as it relates to students and leaders. Do you think we're moving the needle there from your perspective, as you know, your folks you're servicing? What's the sentiment there? There's obviously a lot of attention, but in terms of action, what do you think is needed on that front?
Yeah. A young person told me she was going to a community school clinic on campus, and as she was going to that area, probably a trailer on the school campus, some of the kids says, "Oh, you're going there because your family must really have problems." And at that point, she turned around and went the other direction, and she never went back because it was so stigmatizing. I think we have a lot of work to do in regards to stigma, in regards to understanding that we all have, times where we have issues with moods, anxiety, just stressors, things like that cause us to not function at our peak performance, right? And so how do you do that on a school campus? How do you create, an environment where it's welcome when we have a society that doesn't really necessarily still stigmatizes this? And so one of the things we've done for the last 3 years with partners, and would love to have you all on board, is that we do a week in May, which is Mental Health Month, to talk about stigma on the school campuses. So we provide lessons, we provide campaign kinds of things and things like that. We have an assembly resolution bill. Last year was O'Donnell that carried our legislation to do that. So those are ways that we try to continue to bring about kind of a messaging piece of that. We create messaging on for schools, and actually we have a website that's just devoted all to this, so that you can link onto it and you can be able to get ideas for marquees, get ideas for text messaging, lessons, and other things that can be done any time of the year, just to help everyone understand that it's just like having an illness. We shouldn't blame the person for what they're struggling with. We should embrace it and understand that we all have times in our lives for that. So that's what we're doing system-wise.
And that brings me to this question by Angela Shell, Dr. Whitson. She asks, are there conversations specific to bringing SEL resources to parents and families, as well as in the school setting? And I would just ask for your thoughts on that. Where are we on delivering those types of resources?
Mm-hmm. Probably not doing what we can do, but what we would love to do. We had some series with the PTA, and so we tried to do some series online to teach them about SEL, about conversations they can have with students, but also bringing communities involved and things like that. So we've tried different ways of reaching out for professional development. Obviously, we're on the news quite a bit. We're giving tips to parents, whether it's news or television, radio, podcasting. We've been very active and involved. Nowhere like we were before. We're so busy with trying to message out to parents on things that they can do, and actually understanding the signs of depression, signs of suicide. Those kinds of things are extremely important. Our parents are our eyes and ears to our students. And then the other thing that we're working with school counselors, school psychologists, and social workers is to make sure that the parents understand that this is a resource for them on school campuses. Because I think sometimes in some communities, they don't really understand that this is accessible for them, accessible for their kids.
That's a good segue to the last question I was going to ask, in terms of we're talking to an audience, obviously school administrators, school leaders, site administrators, district leaders. You're representing school counselors, and obviously that's a relationship that needs to be strong in terms of achieving the objectives for students. So from your perspective, or what you hear from your respective members, what's some ways that you think school administrators can better utilize their school counselors to meet all of these goals that we have for students?
I'll do it in 1 minute, but I have about a 30-minute diatribe.
I'm sure you
I really talk about this. And honestly, it was a head scratcher for me. I was as a school district administrator in LA County for 22 years. I was trying all the way, all kinds of ways. And I wasn't just with school counselors. I had discipline. I had, I lived this life, of just so dang busy with so many responsibilities and dabbing into this and that to try to make it effective. But with school counselors, I think one of the things that administrators could do is spend time and be very cognizant of what you hold them accountable for. And so in the areas of need, so in the areas of your LCAP, in the areas of things like, chronic attendance, I can go on, discipline, what are your systems? And so if you allow for school counselors to just, whatever shows up, an urgent care system is the best analogy I have, then that's what you're going to get. And unless you really work with them to do an MTSS model, and some are doing a bang up job. They have certificates on excellence through what we call recognizing, it's called RAMP, but it's with the with our national organization. So there's some, and we preach about comprehensive data-driven school counseling, so that they're actually looking at their metrics, their outcomes for students to see if they're really making a difference. They also have metrics on the other side of things. So when do you bubble up to talk to a kid about attendance? At what point do you have some sort of strategic conversations about, or interventions? That's just one example. Or, an example would be GPA, or an example would be poor school counselor from Seattle. My grandchild, 3.9 GPA, 16-year-old sophomore. The counselor hadn't talked to him, and sports too. He's scholarship all over the place. And she hadn't had a conversation. I thought, what is the metrics that they would actually have a conversation with students in order to get him now in an IB program? And so what I did is I flew up there in the spring, because I knew that conversation was essential for him. And obviously my grandson had privilege with that, but I wondered at that moment and did not intervene as an administrator or a counselor. What I did is just be a grandmother and listen. But I just thought, God, that shouldn't happen. We should have metrics so that this child was talked to at a certain point, and obviously he was able to get into the programs he needed to be successful. So those are the things that administrators can do, is just have intentionality is the word, is what is intentionally they're doing, and then have them report back to you. This has been done. I reviewed Harvard and what they were doing in Howard County during the time that I was administrator, because I saw they were doing this kind of work really effectively. And what I learned from that is that accountability piece, is that have them report to you what they are doing and how they're meeting the goals that you have, and do that on a regular basis. So they draw up the paperwork and they show you, the data sets that they've done and how they're reaching out to improve certain kinds of areas that you're working on with students.
Dr. Loretta Whitson, Executive Director of the California Association of School Counselors. Dr. Whitson, it has been great to have you here on the show. We look forward to having you on here again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And folks, I want to alert you to something, since we've been talking about mental health. And this is about Calhop. The recently launched Calhop Schools Initiative Partnership provides no-cost resources to schools and educational agencies across California to promote mental health and wellness for all education partners. You can get resources for schools. They are available, calhopschools.org. You can see the URL right over there. Edgar, as we cross the bottom of the hour here, a reminder to our viewers, we are off next week for the Labor Day week. However, I will say this, and Edgar may not actually know that this is on his schedule. You and I next Thursday have an event that we've long discussed on this show, and I guarantee we will bring behind the scenes photos of the event to the show right after. I get this as I'm looking at you. I don't think you know what this is.
I'm embarrassed to say I have zero idea what you're talking about.
Perfect. Perfect. Then this will be a surprise for you. Perfect. Edgar, good seeing
I'm
you
sure it'll
today.
be good, whatever it is.
Whatever it is, we'll have all kinds of photos. It'll be great. It'll be fantastic. Hey, good to see you today, man.
Hang in there. Hope everybody has a good week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, folks, so much for being here with us on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We are here live and interactive Wednesdays on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. Enjoy your long weekend, and we'll see you next time.